Okay, I think we are live. So, hi Rico.
Hello, Andrew.
Okay, so we're going to jump into Photoshop. So let me share my screen.
Very excited. Our first session.
Yes, this should be good. Day of Photoshop here. Okay, so you can see that just fine, right?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, so here we have the guy meditating. And okay, so before we do anything, the thing that I always do, and you can see my layers up on the top right, correct?
Yeah.
Layers panel. Okay, so what I always do is I always make a another layer of what I'm working on. And if you do like a Command J on a Mac or Control J on a PC, and are you on a Mac or PC?
Mac.
Okay, good. That's what I thought. Right. So if I do Command J, it just creates like a new, layer one. But I usually like to label it. So if you do Command Option J, okay, you do Command Option J, the new layer panel pops up, and so you can title it whatever you want.
Okay. I usually just do Command J, Command Option J, that layer panel.
That's right. So Command Option J, and then I record it. So, call it retouching. And so I have my own layer. And so I do Command plus to zoom in. So in this case, say we wanted to extend, what is it, the right side you want to extend?
Yeah. Maybe we can take a look at what size that is in image size.
Right. So I go up to image size, or Command Option I. And then did you want to see pixels or inches?
Inches.
Okay, so if I switch it over to inches, it's 12.75 by 8.3. That's 72 pixels per inch, PPI. So say you wanted to make it...
well, if we uncheck the resample box and change that to 300, because that's for print.
Right, but you do know, like, it's always better to have a larger image that you downsample than to try to, like right. You can add 300, but it's...
I want to see how, so that's 3 by 2.
Right, so it doesn't look any different. It's just you've changed the 3 by 2, and you've changed
the resolution.
Yeah. Now what I do is I don't really focus on image size if I'm going to extend. So that's good for now. But so say it's 3 by 2, right?
Right.
What I do is
I'm saying that what if we just build a little more of the ocean and the rock
on the right side?
On the right side.
Okay, great.
Maybe 1 inch.
Okay. So what I do is I don't focus on image size when I'm going to extend. I go to canvas size. And what that does is it's a way that you have this kind of diagram here, and that's telling you which direction are you going to extend to.
Can you talk a little bit about this diagram? This always gets me confusing where to click.
Right.
Click on the left and extend to the right, click on the right, extend it to the left.
Right, that's what I was about to do. That's what I was about to say. So so I just switched it over to inches first. And then all this is just saying that wherever I click, so if I click here to the left, it's showing you that the direction of what I would be adding will be going to the right. And therefore, if I clicked on the right, it brings me back. But then if I click on the right, it's showing that any extension would be going left direction, right?
Right.
So it's kind of confusing because you're clicking on the opposite first.
Side.
Yeah, so I click on the left. It's then saying if I want to extend it widthwise, it'll go to the right, which is what I want. So in this case, it says 3.06. So I might say, okay, well, I don't know if we need 3 inches, but for now, I'll just say from 306 to 606. And then it does that.
Right.
Now, because I had the other layer, the background layer underneath it adds white underneath it.
On both layers.
Well, the top is transparent. You can see it in the preview. But if I go back and I turn off the background layer and I just have the top layer that has transparency underneath, and I go to canvas size, I'm going to switch it back to inches. So I click on the left, and then I make it 606, just to make it even. And then you can see that it adds the, the 3 inches looks so large when it's at that
Okay.
Okay, so I don't think we need that much, but we can always crop it out. Ready?
Yes.
Okay, so a couple things is when it comes to like retouching things like this, extending, a lot of people like to do it the hard way, and they go and they get the clone tool and they start, rubber stamping, cloning from a source point to another point. What I like to do is take the information that's already there. So first, what people tend to forget is that if you first just make a selection, so I grab the marquee and drag it out to a certain place. A lot of times you can just do the edit fill and choose content aware, and then it grabs the information that's in the background and will sometimes populate it nicely. So I always try that.
How much do you have to select for you? I saw you just
See?
select very much. If you go back to what you just did, you didn't select very much information from the source file.
That's right.
So
because
how much do we need to select from the lab?
Right. So I don't tend to overly select, because the more that you select of, say, the rock image, the more there's a chance for it to distort and make it abstract. So as you could see, originally, I only had, say less than a half an inch of the kind of source image. And then I had that marquee on the right. So when I go up and do the edit fill, or if you hit shift delete, then the ContentAware comes up. I hit OK, and it does a pretty good job in terms of the water and the sky. Of course, the rock is, a little abstract. So I would then do a Command D to deselect. And then you have this panel for clone source. And any panel that you want, you can get from Window, and then you just find it in the list. So clone source will be a way that normally I don't like to have it on, but it gives you a preview while you're retouching. So if I hit S for the clone stamp, and I use the left bracket to make the brush smaller. And then anytime I use a tool, I always reference up to the options bar at the top here. So you want to make sure I like to have it a little lower than 100, because I find that it blends nicely. So I have the opacity set to 90 and the flow is 100. And it's set to all layers, but I could even just have it set to current layer. And so if I go ahead and I just do, regular retouching, I option click a source point and then bring it over, I'm just kind of eyeing it, right?
Yep.
But if I have the clone source on, then I could turn on show overlay in clipped. And then what happens is when I do an option click of the horizon line, see how it gives me a preview? So it's a great way to be able to line things up. And so I can line it up while I'm retouching.
It's almost like, sometimes I think about it's almost like after you sample something, it's almost like a camera. You take a picture of the source that where you are going to sample before you click it, before you decide, and
it gives you a nice visual preview of
visual preview. Yeah, that would be a good phrase for it. Yeah.
So then if I click here and I wanted to extend this even further, then it just kind of keeps me aligned. So I click here and then line it up. Let me grab it over here. See, so I can line it up, and then it's kind of right on line. So I'll do that. And then, so I've extended a bit. Let's go from the original. Yeah, so I've extended a bit, and then I want to crop it first. So just choose C for the crop tool, grab the edge, bring it back, and crop it. And then I do Command plus to zoom in. And I'm going to turn this off. I don't want show overlay or clipped anymore, and I'm just going to collapse the clone source. Always get it back in the window menu. So in this case, I don't mind this other rock that was kind of generated, but now we have the kind of middle rock that looks a little strange here.
Yep.
So what I'll do is I'll hit S for the clone tool, and then I'll make the brush just a little bit bigger than the source, what I'm grabbing, which is this dark area. And then I kind of want to build it up a little bit just to have an edge. And I'll grab some of the other ones and bring that to the edge. So it kind of gives it a little thing. Get rid of anything that looks like it's a repeat. Grabbing the top. And then the top looks strange. So I'll option click on the water and just kind of paint the water in. Option click, source point, and then drag over. And then I might decide that I'm going to grab from the other image. So I'll option click here, and then go over here, and then I'll be able to have like a sharp edge to it. Right?
Can you repeat that again?
So I was saying that, you know, I might decide that I want to have a sharp edge from the other rock.
Yep.
So I'll go and I'll option click on that edge, let go, and then go over
to get the sharp edge.
Yeah, to go over to the other rock, and then I'll click, and then when I drag, it's using that same edge for this rock. And I'm just grabbing different areas to kind of build it in. I'm using, for now, I'm just using a mouse, but other times I switch to my Wacom tablet because it has a kind of a better feel for retouching. Maybe next time I'll jump into that. And then one thing to be aware of when it comes to retouching, and I'm not doing a perfect job, but I'm just, you know, showing.
Right. It looks really good already.
Yeah, I think it's blending in well. So one thing that to be aware is when you're doing the edges of something, I have it set to, you know, like 90% opacity. And then if I right click, you'll see that the hardness of my brush is set to 0.
Can you explain what is hardness?
Well, that's what I'm about to do.
Okay.
So the hardness of my brush is set to 0. And so that means that whatever I'm retouching has got a soft edge to it. And so that's good for things that are blending that have texture like the ocean. But if I want something that's a hard edge, such as this rock, I might right click first and change that hardness to 100. And then when I grab, I do an option click on that source point and then bring it over. It's even more kind of realistic and sharp. So you just have to be aware that you have those options and to change those options back and forth. So you right click, and when it's like a pattern or a texture you want to blend, you can make it 0. And then when it's something that's very defined edge, you want to bring up the hardness to like 100.
Okay. Are there any time that we use something in between?
I guess so. It's just I tend to use it. I don't mind going to 0 hardness when I'm blending, but I guess you could also just kind of feel it out and move it to the middle at certain times. But I tend to go to the extremes, really kind of 0 or to 100.
Okay.
So now what I do is I look at the image and if you use the clone tool is very sharp. So as an example, if I option click here, I can go and rebuild, the seagull, right?
Right.
But if I wanted to just kind of blend texture and I see that there's these different kind of white specks in the ocean, then I would hit J and move over to this spot healing brush. And so I hit the left bracket next to the P on the keyboard to make a smaller brush. And then I go over to the areas that I want to get rid of, such as this little white area. And I just kind of click and drag. It just kind of cleans it up. So your eye follows light. And so if there's like little white specks in your image, your eye's moving to that, which isn't really the source of the focus. So I'll just kind of clean these up a little bit. So it's very good for spotting. Hence its name, spot healing brush. And so the difference between these two is spot healing brush means that you can just go over your image and just start kind of clicking and dragging or just clicking for spotting. And then the second option, the healing brush, you would have to option click a source point first, and then you click and drag to do your healing. A lot of times I will just choose the spot healing brush because I believe that Photoshop is smart enough to pick up the right area close to where I'm cloning from and cloning to. Now, if I were cloning here and it grabbed like his shirt or something, then I might be more inclined to choose the healing brush tool and just use my own option clicking for a source point. But it does a pretty good job, so I'm pretty happy with it.
Can you, I saw you did it really fast with the clone stem earlier to just rebuild a seagull. That's really fascinating. Can you redo that?
Yeah, so, okay, so now I hit the S key and I move down to the rubber stamp clone tool. People call it the rubber stamp tool too. Clone tool. And so if you option click like at the edge of the bird on the left side of its wing, and I go to another area, say I want it up here, it's referencing that original source point. So I just kind of follow the shape of the bird, and the sky blends nicely because it's the same color and texture. And so just by doing that, I can clone it on. Now, one thing that I would suggest, I've been doing this for 24, 25 years. So one thing I suggest is when you're going to do things such as cloning an object or a bird, give yourself the freedom to be able to move it around. So instead of like cloning it right onto this top layer, what I do is I click on the new layer icon, and if I option click when I click on it, I can title it. So I could even say, seagull. So there it is. It's a new empty layer.
Yep.
But what I can do is I can change my options. So I always reference my options bar, and I can see that's set to current layer. So I want to say, I'll just say all layers. So that way I can option click seagull and then kind of follow the form and build it out. But now it's its own layer. So when I choose the move tool, I can say, you know what? I don't really want it so high. I want it a little bit lower. And then the trick is see how you have that kind of darker areas.
Yep.
There's two ways that I might fix that. So the first one is I might say, okay, well, I'll just bring up levels. So if I do Command L, or if people don't like keyboard shortcuts, if you go to Image, Adjustments, Levels, and you can see Command L on the right. I can go to the mid-tone slider. So this is your darks on the left. The tab in the middle is your mid-tones, and the right is your highlights. So if I go to the mid-tone slider and I decide to go to the left, I'm then making those kind of darker mid-tones blend in with the same color that's in the background. See? So if I hit preview, that's before, that's after. So that's one way of blending. And then just for the sake of the lesson, if I also double click the layer, I get this blend if options at the bottom. So if I go to the left and I option click, I dissect the tab into two, so it's a little bit more sensitive. And so as I pull this, it will be, usually it pulls away the dark areas, but I think what it might be doing is it might be taking away the bird itself. Yeah, see, it's taking away the bird itself.
Right. I think doing the level earlier, it's
I think it's better, yeah. It's kind of hit or miss. Sometimes it works really well. This is more for like, say you had a white object on a black background, then going to that blend if options might work fantastic.
I have one more question. So in here, you just go into level directly with this layer. What if I do an adjustment layer just for this seagull itself?
Yeah, I don't.
You don't suggest that?
No, because what it is I only use adjustment layers when I know I'm going to be coming back and forth. So,
okay.
Yeah, so adjustment layers is something that, and I can show you that. So I'll show you, doing the same procedure in adjustment layer, but adjustment layers.
That makes sense because we are trying to fix something we're not really going to back in.
That's right.
Change. That's really insightful. Thank you for that.
Right. So if I go to image adjustments and choose levels, I can do the exact same thing where I can bring down the mid-tone slider and then it blends. How come the adjustment's not showing up? It's kind of strange. Oh, that's because I did it direct though. So if I go down here in the layers panel, and then I choose levels from there, then it's now considered an adjustment layer.
Right.
And so I can do the same thing once again.
Use the level.
Yeah.
But in this case, would it adjust the entire everything?
Right. So that's what's happening is, so if I go like this, it's adjusting like everything, as you can see, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the solution to that is if I hover between
two layers,
the levels adjustment layer and the seagull layer, holding the option key in between, when I click, it clips to it. So then when I go like this, it's just affecting the seagull layer.
Right, right.
And that's pretty much why I chose the direct levels, because, you know, there's all these steps that I didn't have to do when I just did the regular one, you know. Where this is good though is like if you, well, let me just show you. It's not necessarily exactly what we're dealing with on this image, but it could be interrelated. Okay, so let me just first fix that. So I go to levels, I go to the midtones, and I just make it a little lighter, and so it blends in. So say I go to the retouching layer, and I take the magic wand, and I click on his shirt. And I'm holding shift, so every time I hold shift, the plus sign shows up, so I can make add more to the selection. So every time I click, it's adding more. And then the one thing to be aware of is if you look up, and every time you use a tool, you should always look up to your options bar. That's what it's for. So in this case, let me just turn this down. I got a little music in the background. Always relaxes me, but Devo's playing a little loud. So when I use a tool like this, I always reference the options bar. And so in this case, if I do 3x3 or 5x5 average, that's like the sensitivity. So I want it to be kind of precise.
What does that really mean, 3x5 and 5x5 average?
Yeah, I don't know, like mathematically what the deduction is, you know, what the definition of it is, but okay. It's like I said, it's kind of like a sensitivity point. So it's more precise when you're at 3x3 or 5x5. And so if you were to do like 101 by 101 and then I click, then everything
that's really
see so everything gets selected, so it's not really precise at all. So Command Z, I switch it back to say 5x5, and then when I click, it's focusing on the range of tones in his shirt.
Right.
So it's like a sensitivity adjustment. And the same thing with tolerance. So tolerance, if I make it lower, it's isolating to colors related to his shirt. I'm kind of surprised it's not picking up some of the similar beige in the stone that he's sitting on, but I'm glad it isn't, because that's not what I'm doing. But I just keep holding shift. As I click, it keeps adding. So yeah, it got a little into his face because it's similar kind of beige or skin color.
Right.
So shift click, shift click. Okay.
I learned so much already. By the way, if you guys are watching this later on YouTube, Andrew is an InDesign Photoshop expert. I'm more of an InDesign expert.
Nice. Well, maybe we could do some recordings with you for InDesign, right?
Yeah, sure.
Do you have a YouTube channel?
I just started one. I made something last night.
Yeah, great, excellent. Okay, so so I've isolated pretty much of his face. Now, if I was holding shift to add to it, right? So if I hold shift and I click, you can see the little plus sign connected to the cursor, right? So that means I'm adding to the selection. Now, if I want to do the opposite, I hold option. So when I hold option, as you can see in the bottom right, a little minus sign comes up. So I'm going to do that on his face. Take away that. Okay, now if I overdo it and it bleeds into the image, I don't want to do that. So one thing that I do is when I'm using these selection tools, like, you know, the magic wand or the quick selection tool, what I tend to do is I then hit Q. And when I hit Q, I get a quick mask. You can also get that down here. And if I double click it, you can choose options for it. So the first thing is, if it looks like this in the beginning, where it's the opposite, I don't really like that. I change it to selected because it doesn't really make sense to me. If I'm going to do a quick mask, which is a preview of your selection with a color, I like it to show the selected areas. And then you can change the color of the preview. So if I was trying to isolate like a, I don't know, a pinkish or reddish Corvette or car, I wouldn't want the color that's masking to be the exact same because I wouldn't be able to see the difference. So you can change it to any color you want. So as an example, I can do that. So I'm going to hit Q, and now green preview. So I do Command plus to zoom in, use my space bar to get the temporary hand tool to move around. And then I choose a brush. And then once again, I always reference up to the options bar and make sure the opacity is 100 so it's solid. And I hit my right cursor. Why is it doing that? Oops.
The green shirt looks great on him.
Yeah, right? But the brush is acting strange. So I have the brush, and I'm hitting the marquee, and it's not necessarily working. But let me bring this down this way. There we go. I guess the size somehow it jumped. It was like huge. I don't know how that happened. But now I'll make it more appropriate through just by right-clicking. And when I click away, it goes away. But you have to do a quick Command Z to get rid of that extra one. And then now I can use the left bracket to make it smaller. Now the trick is when you're doing like a straight line, like on his shoulder, instead of kind of eyeing it and dragging it down, I can click one point, hold Shift, and click again. It does a nice straight line.
Click and shift.
So click and then shift. It does a nice straight line. So that's how I kind of do nice edge work without kind of bleeding into the background a lot. It kind of keeps focus. Okay, so I'm just selecting that. And then therefore, you're using in the mask mode, using black and white. So with my brush set to black, it's letting me add to the selection to the mask. And then if I wanted to get rid of it, I would just switch it so white is the foreground color. And then I can go over like his hands. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more. And then go over these areas. See? So
I noticed that you keep the bubble quite small most of the time.
The what?
I would suggest when working.
You mean the brush?
Yeah, the brush.
Yeah. You call it the bubble. It's not a bubble, it's a brush. But yeah, it is a circular, diagram of it. Yeah, I like to be precise, and the larger it is. So if I was selecting it and it had a selection around his shirt, but then the middle area wasn't selected, then I would choose a larger brush to fill that. But it's filled pretty nicely. And then I hit Q to get a preview again, so I can see some of these edges. And I see around the neck area, it's still kind of leaking over. So I hit X, and X will make white the foreground color so I can erase. And then I hit X again to get black, and now I can paint. I can paint the edge of that. And then, I don't want it on the back of his neck and his ear. So I hit X again, it brings it to white, and then I just kind of paint away. I really should have switched to my Wacom tablet. It's much more graceful for this stuff. Do you use a Wacom tablet?
I have one. You need to teach me how to use it. I have a really big one here. I never use it. I should. I
don't even, set it up too extensively with the brushes because I do more like retouching and subtle painting, but I don't, do a lot of detailed Photoshop painting. So I kind of set it to the most basic settings, but I love the way it feels. It's very good for isolating things and painting selections. So I switch back to X. I hit X, switch back to black as the foreground color. And then I'm just going to do a little bit of the edges. And then there's some bled out here. So I switch it back to white by hitting X. and then I kind of take away just those edges. And this doesn't have to be perfect. I think you get the idea of what I'm doing. But once again, I click and then hold shift and I get a nice straight line. See? And then I switch it back X so it's white. And then now when I paint, it's going to erase. And I still hold click and then shift click to kind of follow a straight line. Okay, and just a little bit more over here. Oops, one over. Okay, I think that's pretty good. All right, close enough. Okay, so what I was getting to was by doing this selection, I can then, well, what I tend to always do too is I will choose my marquee, rectangular marquee, while I'm in that selection, and then I click in the middle and I can choose feather. And maybe if I'm in the magic wand and I right click, I can also choose feather too by right clicking. So it's just further down on the options. And the one thing I've learned in the industry is if something's realistic, like a shirt, I'll use like a 0.8 feather. So it's a very subtle feather. And then the higher the feather, the more softer the edges. So if it's something that's realistic like a shirt, it's 0.8. If it's like a blades of grass, I might make it like 2 or 3 so it blends in with the background. If it's something like the clouds, I might make it like 10 or 12. And then if you really wanted to have kind of a kind of halo or buzz, kind of soft buzz to it, such as the sun or the moon, you can make it like 14.
That's really good. I'm glad you mentioned that, because in the past, I've been told by other professors or experts that when doing object, never go over 2.0 or 2.2. But now you explain much more between an object.
Yeah, I mean, there's a time and place for.
That's great.
Yeah, there's a time and place for all the different kind of options,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just think of it as the lower the number, the more precise, the higher the number, the softer the edge. And then you can even get certain effects like with the moon and sun with set to 12 or 14, where it kind of looks like it's glowing.
Yep. Thank you for that.
Great. So here we are. We did the quick selection, and now we have a selection. It's not perfect, but I think it represents it well. And then I'm still in the, retouching layer. So all I do is I go down to the bottom middle. I click on the icon for the adjustment layers. And now I can do solid color, which is at the top. And so say I wanted to make it like a bluish color. So of course it looks, bad now because it's just set to that. But what you can do is you can go up to the blending modes here in the layers. And so I can change it to multiply. Now what I do is once I change it to like the first one, dark or multiply, I'm aware that I can just hold shift and the plus sign on my keyboard, and I can cycle through all the different layers, or the blending modes, I should say. So I can cycle through, and so without even knowing the name of it, I can just see what effect I like. So this is soft light. I might think that this looks appropriate for it. I don't want it to be too heavy because he's meditating. It's supposed to be peaceful. So soft light might be a nice alternative for that blue color to make it kind of a lavender color or something. So I just shift plus cycle through. But if I did want it to be dark blue, that's darken, that's multiply. A lot of times overlay is a good option too. Here it kind of keeps the brightness.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I saw you because anytime that when we teach new students, anything suddenly come out from the layer palette, they get scared. I saw that when we were picking up the color and suddenly there was this layer came out. How did that happen? Can you go back and show us that?
Which aspect exactly?
Remember when you're pointing that layer, your keyboard?
Well,
how did this whole layer suddenly came out?
Right. Okay. So first it was a selection. So I selected the shirt, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, I went down to the bottom middle of the panel. I'll bring it up so you can see. And so the bottom middle is your adjustment layers. And so I chose the top one, solid color. And
Solid
just by
color.
choosing it, it converted the selection into a solid color adjustment layer with a built-in mask. So the mask on the right, so if I hold down Option and I click, it shows you that that's the mask.
Yeah.
So the mask or the selection, they work hand in hand, makes it so it's isolated to just that selection. And so the solid color adjustment layer is just that selection, that shape. So the beauty is, if I did notice, if I zoomed in, that certain things were missing, with this mask on the right, I could paint in black or white to add to it. So what I mean by that is, if I felt like this was too much or something, I choose brush and I paint, I can erase from the edges.
Right.
See, so I'm cleaning it up a little bit with black. And so if I switch by pressing X and white is the foreground color, then I could add more to it, but I obviously don't want to do that.
So what you are showing us is not only that we were trying to make a selection earlier, that we can do that, and we don't have to do it 110%, and we could just leave it at 80, 90%, and we can come back here and fix the little things even after we change the color.
Right. So the beauty of using layers is you can always go back and forth. As long as you then save it, you do it like a file, save as, and make sure that you save it as a Photoshop file with layers, then you have all those type of options, all those layers intact next time you open it. Technically, if you save it as a TIFF file, you can also choose layers. But the way that I've been working is I only will choose TIFF when it's a flattened version that I'm sending out for print. Things have changed. One thing I've noticed in the industry is that high-res JPEGs are asked for at a lot of print houses, output houses, which that never used to be the case. It used to be like you would send like a TIFF or an EPS file or even a PSD. And they would
Is it because they don't
I think it's just
get
easy.
used to the TIFF, or they just suddenly change to JPEG? I mean, a lot of times I've been told when you save JPEG, you lose some information.
Right, because it's lossy. It's a lossy compression. So it compresses the file. But if you save it as a high res, 300 pixels per inch or higher, high res JPEG, the lossiness is minimal. I think what it is just convenience. I think that a lot of times they will say, just send a high res JPEG because JPEGs are easy to send over the internet. And it's, a file that everyone works with. Problem is, a lot of times you save it with the sRGB color space. So here's my actions. Let me go to my actions over here. So I have a bunch of actions that I've created. And so, right at the top, I have sRGB or Adobe RGB. So by clicking on that, I can switch to a certain color profile. And so the only problem about that is a lot of times they want it to be sRGB, and that's the most minimalized 256 color palette of colors. So you lose some vibrance if it's going to be going for print, Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to just show you that that's kind of one of the options of using adjustment layers. Now, here's the beauty of it. I can turn it on, turn it off. As I said, I can go to that mask and add to it or clean it up, take away. But beyond that, I can double click on the icon of the adjustment layer and boom, I can say, you know what? I really didn't want blue. I wanted green. And all it is a click away. So that's the beauty of adjustment layers. I can say, you know what? I want it to be orange. One click and it's changed. I don't have to reselect. I don't have to do anything else. And so if you save this, and this is for like a client or, a project, and someone says, why did you choose orange? Why don't you go back to blue? Boom, you just click on it and there it is. So that's the beauty of using adjustment layers.
Okay.
Turn them off, turn them on. Okay. Okay, other questions? questions related to?
So we are almost done with here. It's been an hour.
Right.
What would you suggest? Would you suggest the students to shift command option E to save a blue shirt layer, and then shift command option E to save, like, get a bunch of different layers?
Yeah, I don't want to confuse. I wouldn't want to confuse them. So I would just, in the beginning, I would just go up and just do, file, save as. And as you can see, you do get the keyboard shortcuts on the right, and that's something you can get used to in the future. But I would do a save as, and then save it as a Photoshop
or a TIFF
layered file.
Okay.
Well, for me, I like to save Photoshop because I immediately recognize it as it's most likely the layered version. And
yep.
then,
that's the backup. The main source file is the first PSD.
And then what I do, I'm just a little paranoid, is I will do professionally paranoid. I will do an image duplicate, and that's where I'll say duplicate merge layers, and then that'll be my flattened version. So I might call it like print if it's going to print, or web if it's going to be for the web or Facebook or something. And then when I do that, I hit OK. Then it's the same image, but as you look over in the layers, it just says background, so it's flattened. And so then I could then do a file save as and save as JPEG. But what I've done, if you look at my actions panel, I have a save for web setup. So because I do a lot of work, I can just hit keyboard shortcuts related to the action. And I know it seems advanced, but the thing that I love about Photoshop is a lot of advanced things are very easy to do. Mm-hmm. They're advanced concepts, but the process is very step by step. So when I create an action, I can give it a keyboard shortcut, and then it goes to that. So if I wanted to save this for the web, first what I would do, of course, is make sure that when I go to image size, that the resolution might be more appropriate, like 72. And I might want to do resample. So let's go back. So I'll do a option reset. Just curious to see what it says when I have 72. All right, so it looks smaller when I do that, right? And then, see the quality is...
It's bad.
It's bad. But to be honest, though, the one thing I have to say, though, that I've learned is if you're posting on Instagram and Facebook, it's a source of, you either have a page or you like to show your portfolio there. There's this idea that you have to make things 72 pixels per inch and, make things, 72 pixels per inch for the web, but it's not necessarily true. Like a lot of times what I've learned is this. If I go over to my actions, I have a whole thing for like different promos. I run different groups. The one thing I've learned is that it's better quality to even have a high res, and then it's the pixels that count. So when it comes to the image, I will make sure that the width is at least 1200 pixels wide. So that's one thing to kind of get out of your brain set is don't think of it as like saving it as 72 pixels per inch and for the web. Just think of it as what's good quality, because Facebook and Instagram will still kind of compress anyway, so you might as well make it the highest quality you can.
Yep. Right? Yeah. A lot of times that I find that if we do save as 72, by the time we upload, it comes out just lower than 17. It looks crappy.
Right. So it's better to just have high res. So as an example, if I go here, if I go to Command Option I, that was an invert by mistake. This shows me that's almost 4 inches by 2 inches at 300, right? So instead of converting it to anything before I save it, as I told you, I have F5 connected to Save for Web. So now if I hit...
I don't see your panels though.
Oh, it collapsed.
Oh, okay, okay.
Do you see it now?
No, I don't. It's fine. It's fine.
You see the image now, right?
More. I only see the image. I don't see any control panel.
Interesting. Okay, now you see this new panel if I hit F5, right? So now you see...
Yep, I see it. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the Save for Web. So I have it, so I just hit a keyboard shortcut and I go there. And so, why'd that go up? I don't want that there. On the right side, you see it's set to JPEG. and then quality set to 90. And it tells me at the bottom that it's going to be 183K, which is still small. So I could even say, you know what, I'll just make it 100. So even though it was 300 pixels per inch, when I go to save it as a JPEG, it's still only 255K, small. And then I would hit save and then save that as my image for the web, you know. And I have it set up so that I can work fast. So when I hit F5, I can save for the web, and then it automatically has it set that it'll close the image for me. So.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so there's the image. And then, so what we could do is we could do a lesson that could be very helpful for students, people in general.
Or action.
All about layers.
All about layers, yeah, definitely, yeah.
So I could go over all the different options of layers and how I use them, and you know, I'm a big fan of layer masks, so I could show about how we can blend things with layer masking and all that. So
okay. Can we do that next? Maybe we can do that next session.
Absolutely. So we could do layers, and we could also go over what you're talking about is with the cutting out someone from the background who's got like flyaway hair.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Oh, but let me see about the new feature. I'm kind of curious. So say I'm on the retouching layer, and I choose the magic wand, or doesn't even matter, quick selection tool, magic wand. There's now, with the latest version of Photoshop CC 2018, select subject. So I'm just kind of curious how well it works. So if I just go up to the top and I click on select subject, it reads the image with supposed artificial intelligence. And if I hit Q, you'll see it did a pretty good job. Isn't that good?
What just happened?
Got to pay attention here. You missed it. Okay, so here I'm in the retouching layer, and I was going over a new feature.
Yeah.
As long as you are in like one of the selection tools. I wonder if you can be in the, yeah, you can be in the, well, if you're in the marquee tool, then it's select and mask. But if you go to the quick selection or magic wand, then you'll see that there's a select subject button at the top, as long as you're in the latest Photoshop CC. So the minute I click on that, it goes out, reads the image, and I guess it uses some artificial intelligence and creates a selection based on the subject, which is pretty good for one click.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So then that's one click, and then of course I can choose my brush, zoom in, and say, you know what, I missed a couple spots, so I'll just go in and add to it in certain areas, and then where it overlapped, like underneath the arm, I hit X to get back to white, and then I erase it. And I'm not going to do a perfect job, I'm just kind of showing, but I mean, it took 1 second to make that selection.
Whole selection.
Yeah.
What version do you have? I have
right, so it's
14.12.
Adobe Photoshop CC 19.1.1. So it's like the 2018 release.
Okay, I need to update mine. I think I still have the 2017.
Yeah, see, that's the beauty, is like people are like, I'm not sure if I believe in the whole cloud thing. I don't want to be part of Creative Cloud. I want to own my software. But the truth is everything's going cloud-based, so it's kind of wise to kind of understand how it works.
You can own your software. I mean, you open your Uber app, and you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. They update it.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I took an Uber yesterday to a client, and twice, not once, but twice, it tended to like generate the wrong address. And so I had to like work with them about getting a refund. It was kind of weird. So I ended up using Lyft to come back. I was tutoring someone in Lightroom. So
Uber doesn't tell you when they update the app.
Well, I do updates when they come out. I don't mind, but it's just, I like to believe that it's becoming more solid, not less solid, you know? So, yeah. But yeah, so as an example, this just shows you how quick a simple select subject option is now in